I'm just going to dive straight into it. Did Davos finally lose control this year in 2026? What's your read on what you saw coming out of the World Economic Forum?
Well, before we started, thank you, by the way, thank you very much for the invite. This should be a blast today. So before we started, you asked the question, you framed the question a little differently. You said, did they surrender? And my answer to you is no. Did they lose control? Yes.
Okay. Maybe unpack that. So I did ask Tom before we went live, did the globalists finally give up? He said no. And then I did switch them on, did they finally lose control? So you can pick whichever way you want to go with that.
Yeah, the words matter, semantics matter, and let's not kid ourselves. We're not commies. We actually have to be precise in our language. So yeah, no, they didn't. They're not surrendering. Right. Mark Carney's speech was very clear. I think my friend Susan Kokindo over Promethean Action did a great thing with the latest her Wednesday update yesterday, where she very graciously quoted me, which was great. But I'm going to pay it forward when she said, Carney was out there doing the standard, globalist. We have to try and reassert ourselves as the adults in the room. And of course, nobody's believing this anymore because Trump actually went in and was very surprisingly. I was actually surprised at how low key his speech was in terms of delivery, not in terms of what he said, right, but what he delivered. And his delivery wasn't un-Trumpian, right? Like you could tell the parts where he was reading off the teleprompter and reading the speech as written for him by Stephen Miller. And then there were the other parts where he just went off script and was Donald Trump. And it was a very interesting mix of the two personalities. And what was very clear to me was that Trump was giving them, every flaming bag of poop that he had brought to the table and was shooting it all over the audience. I mean, he did not spare anyone, right? He didn't spare Gavin Newsom. He didn't spare Emmanuel Macron. He didn't spare anyone. Mark Carney, all of them. And he only one time did he let his real anger and his real frustration show. And that was impressive to me because, that was that moment. I don't remember quite where it was in the speech, but you'll find it. Go watch the whole thing and you'll see that moment where he finally just lets it out and he's like, oh God, I fucking hate these people. And I hate what you've done to the world and I'm going to fix it. And that little moment told you everything you needed to know. They're not backing down, but they don't have any cards to play against him other than to shoot him and or foment a civil war in the United States. So this is why we have to unpack the difference between, did they surrender? No. Will they be able to do anything about it? Or are we winning? Yes, but it's going to be a war all the way out the door. These people are going to burn everything to the ground. I've been saying this for a while now. And I'll be honest with you. I know this is a Bitcoin podcast, so that means that we're probably dealing with a bunch of bedwetting, pillow-biting libertarians in the audience who cannot handle the fact that you sometimes have to fight to preserve both civilization and your own community. That you can't just stand around all day and go quote Rothbard at them and hope for the best. It just doesn't fucking work. So this is where you have to get down to brass tacks. And sometimes when you're thinking about, you have to look at the world fractally and think of your communities fractally. And in this case, it is absolutely our national community, our state actor has the ability on the world stage is the only thing powerful enough to deal with other state actors. And hate to break it to everybody, but this is the way it works. So you can have a government that is openly globalist working along with all these people, which is what we've all lived under and we've all been imprinted under. And then we can have a government that actually doesn't want to act that way and is asserting its sovereignty and asserting its independence. Between Lutnick and Big Gay Patton, Scott Bessent and Trump, I think the message was delivered very loud and very clear and without a bunch of histrionics. It was actually quite non-toxically masculine. It was just simply, look, this is what we're doing and you can either join us or, we're going to run you over because everybody else wants to go along with us and you people are the weirdos. Walking around with, in your banana hammocks and you're, looking for gold and on on beaches and, having your little weird parties and collecting your little weird art and, sitting in your castles counting your money. No, we're done with this. This is over. You are not the great philosopher kings that, have to be the shepherds of humanity. So they laid that out quite explicitly and quite clearly. And of course, when you're dealing with this kind of, and this is where you got to kind of get into the psychology of all of this. When you get into this kind of devouring mother style politics, which is what these people practice. Like, I don't care if we're talking about the British Empire and the reputational attacks through the media and everything else, or we're talking about the way Ursula von der Satan and Kaja Kallas and all those people run the European Union with this kind of vague disgust at men actually having a say in the matter on anything. When you break down what they're doing, what they're talking about, okay, it's very clear that they do not believe in boundaries. They don't believe in borders, right? They don't believe in any of those things. They believe in open free trade and open depredation and financialization of everything in order to control the world. And that's not the model that most libertarians have in their head when they think free markets and free trade. They think the exact opposite, which they're right about, and which is, is the kind of the Austro-libertarian, the end of Austro-libertarian thinking, which is that unfettered free trade, or at least the ruthless defense of property rights in a very Rothbardian sense, would lead to intentional communities that set up very clear freaking boundaries that if you cross my boundaries, I have the right to shoot you, right? That, again, the name of the service is Gold, Goats, and Guns, folks. I haven't, repudiated that, but that's not the world we live in. We don't live in that world. And most modern libertarians can't see the difference between the world we live in, the world we've got, and the world that they want, and the path to get there. And I've been screaming about this since I first got in front of a microphone on Periscope during the first Trump campaign in 2016. I'm like, this is the world we want. I'm going to argue for the world we want, not the world we've got, but how we get there is a very important thing, and order of operations matters. So we're at a point now where you're going to have to just make the deal with the dragon, in this case, Donald Trump, or the Federal Reserve, or any of these other institutions that have an unbelievable amount of actual power, real power. They command armies, they command financial tools that no one else has. And if those things are used for the right purpose, in the right way, they're going to make mistakes, and you can argue about that all day long. But in the general sense, they're there for protecting or reasserting and going to war on behalf of human sovereignty. Then you have to let them go do that job. You have to think of Donald Trump like the gargoyle that guards the cathedral, right? The cathedral is us, right? The cathedral is civilization. We have all these anti-civilizational forces out there, two of which just got arrested by Pam Bondi for breaking into a church in Minneapolis over the weekend. I note the irony of arresting fat black BLM agitators under the KKK Act. I don't know about you, but 2026 has been the most fucking hilarious thing I've seen so far. So now, when you look at it that way, what Trump is, what we're staring at here is that moment where you have to say they're the gargoyles standing outside the gates of the cathedral to stop the freaking barbarians. The gargoyle is not allowed to enter the cathedral. Donald Trump is going to be vilified through history, the same way that we look at Patton as a very complicated figure, because he understood that you fight the war all the way to the end, and the goal of World War II was to stop, was to protect Eastern Europe from being overrun by communists or fascists. But then we handed them off to the fucking communists. And he's like, no, we have to protect them as well. So the war's unfinished if we don't push the Soviets back into Russia where they belong. So that's what it's that dichotomy. It's that tension that exists within the modern quote unquote libertarian right. And it is being, I'll be honest with you, it's being intentionally pushed by certain people who purport to be libertarians in the commentariat as they pillow bite their way through. Oh my God, Trump said something terrible yesterday, or he's not doing enough to win the midterms, or I can sit here and name names all fucking day long, and you see me do it on Twitter. If you watch me at all, you know exactly who I'm talking about. These people are operatives. Like they're there literally to thieve your reason and thieve your enthusiasm for this, because they don't actually want to win. They just want to continue their grift of being commentators in a space where they can criticize whoever's in power. And that's retarded, because libertarianism had its most powerful moment during 2006, 2008, 2010, 2012, all during those Ron Paul years, when we were in the opposition and the zeitgeist started to come to us and we were in opposition. And when you're in opposition, yeah, you hold to your principles and you be a douchebag and you pound the table like literally like fucking communists, like as hard as possible. And I mean that rhetorically. But the minute you get into power, you stop acting like the opposition, and now you have to start saying, "Okay, politics is the art of the possible. What can we get done practically in this amount of time with the structures that we have in place?" Oh, all of a sudden, that's beyond the pale. That's all of a sudden we can't have that, and that was the message I delivered to the Mises Institute last year when I went to and I gave the keynote address and was summarily rejected by the people. And oh, by the way, no one can actually see it because there are a bunch of virtue signaling libertarians who can't handle even mild criticism. That's fine. It is what it is. I'm not bitter. So where we are today, and as we look at how the Davos is playing out, it's simply this. It's the reassertion of let's put it this way. From Davos's perspective, any expression of masculinity, toxic or otherwise, is toxic. Okay. And it's fascist. Like, having a dad at this point is fascist. If you're white and you had a dad, you're a fascist, which is retarded, of course. But that's the way that's the way they've set up the rhetoric, right? Everybody to the right of Karl Marx is a fascist. Like, okay. That's a false dyad, and it's not reasonable. It's not even close to being rational. So when you watch Trump, and it's been interesting, I've talked to a couple of different people since Trump's speech yesterday morning. They've all said the same thing. They're like, I've talked to my shitlib friend and watched the speech, and they're like, wow, I really like that version of Donald Trump. I'm like, yeah, that guy's easily possible. He's also that guy. Okay. So Trump understands now is the time to like to do what's necessary to bring the next, cohort of people into the coalition. But that's a political statement. But what he did yesterday was just a kind of non-toxic masculinity version of his normal self. He's got Scott Bessent, Big Gay Patton. He's got Howard Lutnick, who literally just told them all, look, this is what we're doing. Globalism is dead, and you people have destroyed the world. Now we're going to move forward. And it was interesting to watch Lutnick do that, because I'm not Lutnick's biggest fan, but he was absolutely in his element yesterday. It was very, very good. So, I don't think Davos is going to surrender. But I do think that Trump and company understand what the problem is. And they all, even to the point where I think we had Jameson Greer go, our trade representative, literally invoke the Alexander Hamilton model of national greatness, which my friends like Matt Ehret and others have been screaming about for years. And hell, I used to think Matt was a commie because he was arguing for Hamilton. That's how far down the libertarian rat hole I was. I had to apologize to him one day, the last time I had him on my podcast. So, which I did, flat out. And so it was fun. But that's the reality. The reality is that we're going to use political power in this moment in time to change the course of history and the course of human endeavor. And if we lose this fight, and this is a war, if we lose this fight, that's it. And we're done. And I can read all of the chats, and you guys all sound like the typical fucking libertarians I've seen I've been listening to for the last year and a half. Likes to hear himself talk. I'm ridiculous. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I'm telling you all, you're a bunch of bedwetting, pillow biting fucking retards. And you always have been. And it's time to grow up. And it's time to come out of your parents' garage and get some fucking shit done. You can't just stack gold, buy Bitcoin, and wait and chuckle and collapsitarian. That's not a civilizational position. And that was the whole point of being a libertarian in the first place, which was to offset and be the antipode to the anti-civilizational forces of Marxism. And yet you sound just exactly like Marxists. So enjoy it. Okay. I relinquish the microphone.
Love it. No, Tom, I told you at some point I wanted to touch on the libertarianism because I feel like I've grown out of it, maybe in part because I've listened to you. You've been one of the, I think, defining, I don't know, lights at the tunnel explaining what's going on in geopolitics. So I truly love what you've been saying. There's a few people that I listened to recently, and I know for a lot of people in the audience, it might be way out there. It's like, what's this guy talking about? But when you really dive deep into what Tom's saying, it starts to make a lot more sense than, you know, a 15-minute tirade at the start of the show. So we're going to unpack it a little bit. Okay. We're going to unpack.
Is true. That wasn't that. And that was, and by the way, for those of you who are the first time listening to this, that was tame. Okay. That was tame. So
yeah, that was a tame Tom rant. Okay. So let's unpack. We just got Davos, Trump, you know, what Scott Bessent did, what Ledn has done at Davos, first couple of days. It does seem like the first couple of weeks of 2026.
Stop for a second. I just want to make one thing abundantly clear to anybody who thinks that Simon Dixon is not City of London agent. You're out of your minds. I will not debate. I do not debate people who I know. I don't know this, but that's my argument. I watch him and I watch the body swerve, and I can tell the difference between somebody who's real and somebody who's trying to body swerve. I nearly got subsumed into that by about 6 or 7 different people over the course of my career in the last 7 or 8 years. I've watched it happen. I don't buy Simon Nixon one whit. That guy's a classic Pied Piper of walking in, saying the right things, and then body swerving and into the doomer cult. And that's his job, is to keep you there all day long. No, you need hope, and you need to be optimistic that you can win this fight, not lose it. Bullshit. So fuck all of that noise. And I'm dead serious. That means that goes double for Robert Barnes, and it goes double for all of these people. Every goddamned one of them that has tried to keep you in this pocket. Thomas Massey's fucking off-brand Rand Paul, all of these people. They're all not your friends. They're all arguing to stay in the matrix. Thomas Massey's still screaming about fucking Epstein, and meanwhile, Trump is literally remaking the goddamned world in your favor. Okay, go. Okay, that's my. Okay,
Okay. So, anyways, what I was going to tee you up is, it does seem like 2026 Trump is like a totally different beast than 2025 Trump. So could we get a recap of what you saw Trump do in 2025, and then we'll take the conversation from there.
Okay, so I'll take the temperature down a notch now, because I'll stop looking at the chat, because all the chat does is turn me into old live stream Tom. And for those of you who will watch this, who used to watch my old live streams on YouTube, when I used to pull a double rye, put on a hat, and start screaming into the microphone, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's start with the basics. What did Trump do to start his administration? The first thing he did was he defunded as many of the NGOs as possible. He started to pull the public money network away from the globalists. So it was the beginning of, and it's not perfect, he has not stopped the flow, he has slowed the flow down of your tax money, of your life, the hours of your life that you spend in support of the federal government, going to all of these quote unquote non-governmental organizations and 501c3s that were then being used to radicalize you and to replace you, right? Radicalize you into thinking that there's no chance that we can get out of this mess by spending all of our money and spending us in the debtor's prison and spending money in ways that would make drunken sailors blush. No, we have that on one side, and then take that money and then use it to try and replace you, to subsidize hundreds of billions of dollars worth of devil's legions around the world, drug running, human trafficking, stolen elections, All of it. I mean, every friggin' bit of it, down to like suppressing the price of gold and silver. Like, where do you think this money comes from? How do you think they were able to fund these systems? So he starts there, right? And this is all downstream, of course, from our hated Federal Reserve Chair, Jerome Powell, replacing LIBOR with the secured overnight financing rate, and finally giving us control over the short end of the yield curve for the first time in our fucking history since Bretton Woods. Oh, by the way, that's only a really small little fucking thing. So, which I know would take another hour for me to unpack, but I've done hundreds of hours of podcasts.
Yeah.
For those of you in the audience never heard me talk about the importance of implementing SOFR at the expense of LIBOR, I absolutely recommend that you've talked to your friends who are fans of mine. They'll point you in the right direction. I've done 1,000 podcasts on this. Okay. And I've convinced some of the most important people in the fucking world that I was right about this, who were all looking at me like going, what the fuck is he talking about? And I'm like, yeah, okay. You might want to start with my interview with Daniel DiMartino Booth on my podcast 3.5 years ago. She's on the podcast twice. You can listen to both of them. It's probably a good starting place for a lot of people. But what's important is that once we had control over the financial control over the dollar, then it would actually set the stage for Trump to come back to office. And so Trump then starts the process of defunding the public money, right? Get rid of let's do the triage. We have to stop the bleeding. The patient is bleeding out. Let's stop the bleeding. First thing you do is you slow down the money going to USAID and as many of the NGOs as possible. You put a kibosh on all of that. You start to freeze money by simply threatening to audit everybody via Doge, right? A lot of those Doge audit numbers, they already been done. Like I've talked to people who are close to the administration. Like, they knew exactly where all the fucking fraud was. They knew where it all was in 2022, 2023, 2024. They was waiting to come back into power. So after Trump gets shot and he realizes, I honestly think that that's the turning point. That's when he decided to go with JD Vance as his VP, who is, by the way, a Marine, a killer, and a vindictive prick. Okay? Just letting you know. Okay? Same thing with Pete Hegseth. Okay? And we need men like this at this point in time, because you have to counter the reputational kind of, devouring mother, fucking feminist bullshit that we have coming out of Europe and the EU and the UK. But stop the public flow of money. Then you start going after the private flow of money. And what's the private flow of money? This is my friend Ian Burlingame likes to talk about this stuff. And if you haven't listened to EM talk, you should absolutely chat with EM about how all this plays out. But the way EM likes to frame it is there's 3 layers of money. There's the public money, which we spent the first half of 2025 staunching the flow of. Then there's the private money, and that's the organized crime money, right? That's the drug trafficking and the human trafficking and the organized crime and all of that stuff that funds the IRGC out of Iran, that funds Hezbollah, that funds Trendagua and the Chinese triads and the Russian mobs that are living in the UK and the guys that are all that were all named in the Panama Papers that are running basis trade operations against the U.S. Treasury market out of the Cayman Islands. All of that stuff that's the private money layer. And Trump has been attacking that directly as well. That's, by the way, what Venezuela was really fucking about. It wasn't about the oil. It was about all of that. It was about setting up the U.S. Navy right there, and that Venezuela was the linchpin to securing effectively the southern maritime border of the United States, the Gulf of America. And by the way, you know what Greenland's really about? And if you look at what he finally negotiated for Greenland, which is exactly all he wanted. So he got exactly what he wanted, as opposed to getting the whole thing, which was he wanted to be able to put listening stations for missile defense, quote unquote, missile defense on the northern border of Greenland. Why? Because how do you think they were smuggling all these fucking fat assholes into Minneapolis? Where do you think the lieutenants for George Soros's and Alexander Soros's, ground attack against the United States is going to come from? These people are setting up. This is what I mean by Davos is not rolling over. They're doubling down on trying to start a civil war, a domestic civil war. And what Trump is doing is stemming the flow of not just the money that supports that network, but then also stopping now the men and material and all the smuggling routes through Canada and through Mexico into the United States to bring all these guys over there. Because once all the conflicts overseas in the Middle East and Ukraine and everywhere else, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, all that are wound down, and all these trained fucking fighters, they're all going to be brought over here to run the operations. Like the kids who are radicalized, stupid fucking purple-haired, nose ring wielding Antifa and Antifards. All right, those guys they're just shock troops. They're just brown shirts. They don't matter. Okay? Without organization, without lieutenants, that whole decentralized network of, how they talk about Antifa doesn't really exist. It doesn't really exist. It doesn't really exist. Yes, and it's a decentralized network of terror cells. Ultimately, well, they have professional leadership at every one of these places. Those are the guys that we're going after. So that has to be stopped. So you public money, then the private money, and then once you've got those two things shut off or at least staunched, then you can start forcing them to put their stolen money on the table, the money that they're sitting on in their castles in Luxembourg, right, in their castles in south of France and everywhere else that they got stashed around the world in banks no one's ever heard of, managed by bankers who don't have Wikipedia pages. And those people and that money, I suspect, and this is now speculation, is all predicated on the physical delivery of physical silver to the financial markets, because that's how they've been getting their income streams, which is through the old British pound sterling system that requires physical silver. And it's still there. And that network still exists. And that's part of the reason why silver was held at such a low, demoralizingly low price for so very, very long. And that's part of the problem today. And I think that's part of the reason why we're watching this massive operation being run to reprice silver. And I've spoken to my friend Vince Lanci about this a number of times. If you don't follow Vince, folks, you need to follow Vince. No one knows the ins and outs of the gold and silver trading operations better than Vince Lanci. And then when he and I sit down to talk, and he's been on my podcast at least 7 or 8 times. And when you listen to Vince and I go back and forth, and he's looking at the structure of the markets, and he knows how these guys set up their trades and their long short positions and everything else. And then you've got my, admittedly, you want to call it conspiratorial mind towards geopolitics, and you put the two of them together, you can see how the whole thing just like meshes together into one big, beautiful operation. And you're like, oh, right, that's why that connects to that. That's why India is acting this way. That's why the British are doing this. That's why we're doing this. And the only conclusion you can draw ultimately is that China and the United States are in the process of wresting control over the pricing of all the strategic commodities of the world from City of London for themselves. And that is part of the same operation to break down the 3 layers of money, of illicit money that is used to prop up the globalist enterprise that we see at Davos. Okay, first the public money, then the private money, then their stolen money. And if you attack the regime at the financialization heart, which is their ability to control the price of the collateral on which all of the world's debts are valued, then they have no power left. Because that's the source of their real power, is the ability to leverage that collateral, oil, gold, silver. I hate to tell you, folks, they own a lot of Bitcoin too, or at least they did. That Bitcoin, why Bitcoin, I think, has been bombed back into the high 80s, is because they're having to liquidate old wallets and serve dollars into a gyre that they can't fill, because it's a vacuum that's bigger. It's a black hole of obligations that's bigger than even their asset pool. When I see things like UBS is short silver to the point where it's 200 times their cap table, I'm like, Okay, I might not believe that number 200 times, but I can believe 20. And it doesn't matter. That's like nuclear. That's like having, 20 times the nuclear weapons necessary to blow up the world. Once you blow up UBS once, the other 19 times don't matter, except for the people who are the counterparties to all of those trades. So, yeah, when I sit down and I go on a rant like I did to start this thing, okay, and to breathe fire into everybody's and breathe fire up everybody's ass, I'm doing so from a position of understanding this in a multi-dimensional way. And I'm not just like talking out my ass here, folks. I've worked really fucking hard at this, and I've done hundreds of hours to try and explain it all. But that's where it comes. That's where my work has led me over the years, inescapably going, this is an attack on City of London and Davos in Europe. So Trump started 2025 with that, and has throughout 2025 and into 2026 now, he is executing on that three-layered strategy. Stop the public money, stop the private money, force them to put their money on the table. And we're beginning to see them having to put their own money on the table. That's what we're beginning to see. But that's, where I think we are in that part of it. Their response to that, of course, is to touch off and light off, open an armed insurrection against the federal government in the United States at the state level. Obviously, they want to send the states, the blue state governors, into open insurrection. And they're trying to dare Trump into using the Insurrection Act too early to turn him into Orange Lincoln. And so far, he's resisted that because he doesn't need to do so, because he knows he doesn't actually need to do so. It's not a repeat of 2020 where he didn't use the Insurrection Act to his detriment. There, I think he was actually honestly frozen. Here, I think it's different. I think he understands that he is far more prepared for this than he was in the past. Because what I really do believe is that they understand the parameter of the problem. And because they understand the parameters of the problem, they're actually pushing the pace, not only on the international stage, but on the domestic stage as well. Minnesota was an easy target. Okay. And what do I mean by that? When you go back to Nick Shirley and the viral video of Quality Learning Center and, all of that, did anybody with 3 brain cells to rub together to make a spark believe that Nick Shirley did this investigative journalism on his own? I didn't. I don't think anybody did. But that doesn't mean it's not that what he was uncovering wasn't true. Because 48 hours after that video went live, Kash Patel comes out and says, well, yeah, we've been in Minnesota since July investigating all this stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, I can put 1 to 1 together and get 2, by the way, or 3 in this case, right? Like Patel and company in the FBI have been in there doing all this work, and Scott Bessent's been in, at Treasury, have been mapping all the money flows and mapping all the money. Tom Homan's talked about this explicitly in the aftermath of the LA riots back last January and into June. So let's put all that together and they go, oh, so they've been in Minneapolis. They know what's going on. And then they just handed it to Nick Shirley and you go, come on, go do the thing, boy. And then we'll just amplify it on Twitter. That's what they did. And then that sets off a chain of events that are, completely predictable. Because remember, every day is opposite day in Trump 2.0 America. Whatever Trump does, they're going to take the opposite side of. Whatever Trump says, they're going to take the opposite side of. And they're going to amplify it into oblivion. I want Greenland. Oh, Donald Trump is going to invade Greenland. No, I want Greenland. And then they create some false, goal on his end. Like, no, I mean, he's willing to play their game, but he doesn't care. He doesn't need to put troops in Greenland if he doesn't need to. Like, come up with a negotiated settlement. So, but every day is opposite day. So you go into Minneapolis and you say, well, you've been stealing money left and right with all these fake daycare centers. And no, we haven't. Yeah, you have. We have, and then every day you just drip, drip, drip Andrew Breitbart out, James O'Keefe, all the information. And eventually it sets in motion a series of escalatory moves on their part. They either have to put their army on the ground and go for the gold now and go for the win now when they're not ready, or dismantle the entire operation. That's it. Like, so that's what they're doing. That's why they attacked the money laundering operations and a literal dry cleaner in LA early last year on purpose. They went in there on purpose to gauge what the response would be. What was the response? Alexander Soros and Gavin Newsom call up a rent the beaner mob and turn the whole thing into a race riot and try and gin up a race riot. What's Trump's next reaction? Within 24 hours, he nationalizes the California Guard, and within 2 days, he sends in the Marines and cleans the whole thing up. That was a trial run on everybody's part to see what everybody's reaction would be. They tested Trump. Trump tested them in return. And then we didn't see any more violence in LA for the rest of the year. So that model is already played itself out. And it played itself out the same way and he did the same thing on the world stage. He gave Israel and Iran the war they both said they wanted. Fine, beat the crap out of each other. I'll protect the Israelis. The Russians may or may not protect the Iranians. Hold Netanyahu on a leash to just go after military targets, which is what he did. Don't go for regime change unless I tell you to. Khamenei didn't overreact. The IRGC got wiped out. Faraday got bound back to the Stone Age, and the Mossad headquarters got hit in Tel Aviv, and everybody got their hair mussed and their nose bloodied, and they went, "Oh shit, war sucks. Maybe we shouldn't do this." Yeah, maybe you shouldn't do this. Now let's cut a peace deal over Gaza, and now let's start rebuilding the world. Can't get the Ukrainians to accept that yet. One day, hopefully, but Greenland first, Canada next. Maybe we'll get Ukraine.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending, with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally not only have an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. You pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you today. Simply Bitcoin viewers get 0.25% off their first loan by using the link in the video/podcast description. What are you waiting for? Head over to ledn.io today.